friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Tea-rrific Day, the Tea-rrific Day add-on, and the Treehouse die set. So I've stamped all the images I'll be using on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with the mouse, and I decided to do him in grays. So I went with N0, N1, and N3. So I'm starting with the N3 for his shadows, and then I'm going to blend those out with the N1, just going over the edge of that N3 and pulling that darkest color into the midtone. And then for the highlight, I'm going to use N0. And I did decide to leave a little white space on his muzzle, so I just left the plain white cardstock for that. And he wasn't quite dark enough for me. There wasn't enough contrast there, so I am going to go over him with a second layer. I decided to go ahead and leave that in the video. I know a lot of you guys prefer to see the entire coloring process, and since there weren't a ton of images today, I thought it would be fine and it wouldn't make the video too long. So he did get a second layer, and then I'm going to do the little cake knife and the fork with these shades as well, so that they'll just have a nice silvery tone to them. And I added the shading on the right hand side on the cake knife and then on the fork as well, although you can't really see too much of it since it's such a small object. For my bunny, I'm going to use some browns, but I wanted to keep him pretty soft, so I went with E50, E51, E53, and E55. So for him, I'm starting with the E55, and this time I'm placing my shadows on the right-hand side of his body since he's facing toward the left. I'd like to keep my critters having their faces highlighted so that you can really see their features clearly. So I always put the shadows on the back well, not always, but just about always, I would say, on most cards. And then I did also put a shadow under the hat, and since it's kind of tipped forward on his face, I also put a little tiny shadow right above his nose. So I'm blending that out with the E53, and then I'm coming in with the E51 and bringing that color even more towards the front of his body. I also left a little bit of a white muzzle on him, and then I'm going to use the E50 to color in the inside of his ears. I'll also transition the muzzle area into the white and add some color to his belly with that as well, and leave the rest white. And then I'm going to do a second layer on this guy too, because I just really like how that second layer increases the saturation and depth of the coloring, and it also just makes your blend so much more smooth. I think it's a crucial step in making sure that your images are really well blended and vibrant. So I'm going to finish up the second layer on him, and then I'm going to also color in my cake with this combo. But for the cake, I'm going to start with the E53 and add some shadows there into the side and also into the cut part. And then I'll bring that color forward with the E51 and save a little bit of room for that E50 for a nice highlight. And then I let that dry for just a few seconds, and then I came in with the E55 and added some dot detail to give it like a crumbly texture, almost as if it's like a carrot cake or some other kind of spice cake. So it has these little bits and pieces in it. I make a really delicious apple spice cake that kind of looks like this one. So then I'm going to go on to the little birds, and for them I'm using BG10, BG11, and BG13, adding that BG13 down their back, so one on the left and one on the right since they're facing opposite directions, and then pulling that color out with the BG11 and making sure to go over the edge of that BG13, not cover it completely, but just over the very edge where the color transitions into the next shade, and then filling in the rest of that space with the BG10. I'll do a second layer on both of them as well, and then I'm going to start coloring in some of the accessory images. So I'm going to go up and do one of the hearts in the banner, and the banner is actually from the set Scent with Love, which is the skunk set, and I just forgot to show that at the beginning. It's the only image that I pulled from that set, but I just thought the banner would make it fun since I want to create a birthday card, so I thought having a little party banner would kind of tie that theme in. And then I also used just the lightest shade, the BG10, to add a touch of color to the white frosting. Then I'm going to move on to my noses and ears and rosy cheeks, and I'm doing all of that with R11 and R20. So I did the noses of the mouse and bunny with just the R20, and then used both shades for the rosy cheeks, and then both shades for the ears as well. Then I'm going to darken up this combo by adding in the R22, and I'm going to color in the first heart in the banner. Just making sure to keep my shading consistent, so I'm doing all of them with the shadow on the left hand side. I don't know why I picked that side, but it doesn't really matter as long as you keep it consistent across the board, or you could switch it to the other side halfway through. I'm going to hang on to the R22, add in the R24 and the R29, and do the next heart in that little banner. And then I'm going to continue coloring in some of the other images. I'll use the R24 to color in the little circles on top of the cake, which I'm imagining are cherries. And then I will do the hat band on the bunny, and I'm going to do the bow tie as well to match. So on those, I just started with the R29, blended out with the R24, and used the R22 for the highlight. And then I did decide to do the filling on the cake to be the same. So it could be like a cherry filling or, you know, whatever. So I just used the R24 and the R22 for that. My next combo is going to be an orange combo, and I went with YR00, YR02, and YR04. I used the YR04 for the bird's beaks, and then I'm using all three shades to color in the next heart in that banner. And then I also wanted something else to be orange in this scene since the bird's beaks are so tiny. So I decided to do the butterfly, so it could almost be like a monarch butterfly or, you know, something else. It doesn't really have the black spots, but you can use your imagination there. So I colored that in with the darkest toward the center of the body and the lightest toward the edges of the wings. Next up is yellow, and I went with Y11, Y13, and Y15. So I will do the next heart in the banner, and then I'm also going to color in more accessory images. So I'm going to do the cake stand, and I'm adding that shading on the right hand side this time, adding the Y15 there. And then I'm going to pull that color over with the Y13, making sure to leave room for the highlight with the Y11. Just kind of filling that in. And then of course I did a second layer on that as well, just to kind of increase that saturation, because these colors do end up looking pretty similar with just one layer. And I didn't go completely over the Y11 the second time, just to make a little bit more contrast there. And then I'm going to do the bow tie on the mouse with this combo as well. Next up is some greens, and I decided to go with yellow greens. So I'm using YG21 and YG23 and YG25, doing the next heart on the heart banner. And to tie those colors in elsewhere, I'm going to do the little flowers in the bird's hair, feathers, whatever you want to call it, and also the handle on the cake knife. And then I'm going to bring in a purple combo, and I went with VO4, VO5, and VO6. So I'm going to do the last heart on the banner, and I did do a second layer on that as well, especially with that darkest shade to increase that saturation. I think I didn't even go over the VO4 a second time to make it a little bit darker there on the left. And then I'm also going to use these shades to do the bunny's hat, just to have that purple tied in somewhere else as well. It was a bit darker though. I wanted to have a bit lighter of a highlight to kind of match the coloring on the rest of the items. So I did pull in the VO1 to finish off the hat. And then of course did a second layer there just to smooth everything out. And then I'm going to grab a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and just go over the eyes of my critters. This is an extra step, but it does make them nice and bright and shiny again, so it really helps the eyes to stand out from the rest of the coloring, and so that you're really able to see their features clearly. And then I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. So next I'm going to take the different parts of the tree house and die cut them out of some colored cardstock. I'm using Craft for the tree trunk and cilantro for the tree tops. And then I'm going to add some Distress Oxide ink to give them a bit more color and some depth and definition around the edges. So the first shade I'm using is Twisted Citron, which is very similar to the cilantro. It doesn't show up a whole lot on camera. It's more visible in person. And then I'm going to darken that up with some Mowed Lawn and just kind of go all around the outside edges, so it just makes that stitching detail even more visible. And I'm going to do the same to the larger treetop. So I cut the smaller one out twice and then the larger one just once. And then I'm going to do some splatter detail on them as well, just to help it look like little, speckles of individual leaves. So I'm pressing both of those inks onto an acrylic block, watering that down a bit, and then I'll pick it up with a paintbrush and just tap it all over those little leafy sections to give them some more interest there. So I did the cilantro first, and then I'm going in with the Mowed Lawn and just tapping it off the edge of my acrylic block so I get nice fine splatters. And then once I'm done, I'm going to set these two pieces aside to dry. Then I also cut down a piece of cilantro using the Slimline Grassy Hillside Borders. So you don't actually need the slimline version. You could use the regular one, but I just don't own it. And I like that I can shift the slimline version around to get the exact shape hill that I want. So I'm adding those same two colors of Distress Oxide ink to the top of that. And this time, instead of like blending it down, I'm kind of starting at the top of the grass and pulling it up so that I don't bend those little grass details. And then doing more splatter on that as well to match. I had enough of the cilantro, but I had to add some more of the Mowed Lawn because there wasn't enough left to splatter on that as well. So I'm going to do that until I'm happy with the look, and then I'll set this piece aside to dry as well. And then I'm going to move on to my tree trunk, and I'm going to darken that one up using some Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. So I'm just blending that on, making sure that it's darker on the outside edges and letting that fade to the regular craft cardstock toward the center. And that darker ink is also going to help highlight all of the stitching detail that makes up the wood grain of the tree. Next, I wanted to create a sky background, so I'm taking a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and the Cloudy stencil, and I'm going to blend on some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink. So I'm starting at the top of the stencil and kind of pressing down more firmly as I lift off, so it gets like a darker edge right where the stencil is and then kind of fades as it goes up the panel. and then I turn that stencil so I can get a different cloud formation and continue working my way up, making sure that I don't cover up all of the white of the cloud, but you know, just kind of help it to look layered and dreamy by you know, leaving some of that white but having that blue kind of fade up toward it. And then I just will continue working my way down that panel until I've filled up pretty much the entire thing. And the great thing about this stencil is not only can I rotate all 4 sides of it, but I can also flip it over and use the back side to give me 4 more different cloud formations. So you really can get like 8 different cloud looks on this one die. So once I have that entire panel filled up, I'm going to add some of that ink onto an acrylic block as well and do some more splatter detail just to add some movement into the background. And then I'm going to set this panel aside to dry as well, and I will start building up my tree house. So I've die cut part of the tree again out of some mermaid cardstock from Lawn Fawn, and I'm just going to trim out the door and glue that right over top of the craft door so that I can get, you know, like a different colored door, like a painted door. And I just added a little bit of that Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink that was already on the blending foam to give it a bit of definition on the outside edges. And then I'm adding some Barely Art Precision Craft Glue to that and lining it right up over the first one so I get a nice pretty pop of that aqua blue. And then I'm going to add the little frame around the window and the door. And I cut both of those out of some ground coffee cardstock. So I'll add the door frame around as well. And I'll hang on to that inner piece that the die for the door frame cut out, as I'm going to use that a little bit later. But first I'm going to start adhering this background together. So I'm going to take that grassy panel and glue that down at the bottom of my sky background, just making sure it's on there nice and straight. And then I'm going to add my tree, and I want to add something behind that door. I don't need it to open because some of my images are going to actually cover it up, so it won't be able to open freely. But I didn't want you kind of looking through the door at the grass. I didn't mind it with the window because some houses have a window exactly opposite each other. But I thought it would be a little bit odd if you could see the grass through the window of the door. So I'm just going to glue that dark brown door innard right over top on the back so that it kind of fills in that window and looks like, you know, like a darkened room inside. You could also do yellow if you wanted it to look like lights are on, or any color really. So then I'm going to add the little parts of my treetop. I'm going to take the smaller sections first and add those to either side, and then I'm going to add the larger section in the center between them. And I didn't want it to hang too far over the top of the card, so I'm just kind of adjusting them while that glue is still wet and trying to make it so that most of that top is still within the border of that sky background. Then I trimmed that entire panel down with the outside in stitch rectangle stackables, and I'm going to pop it in my MISTI so that I can stamp my sentiment and also a little bee trail. So the sentiment that I'm using is from the Reveal Wheel Friends and Family sentiments. And I am building my own sentiment that says, "Hope your birthday is filled with cake." So I'm stamping that down with VersaFine Onyx Black ink since it lays really nicely over Distress Oxide ink. And I did stamp it down twice to make sure it was nice and bold. And then I'll pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using Peacock cardstock for the card base and Peacock ink to stamp on the inside. And I did a little tray of treats plus the squirrel and the little acorn teapot and the sentiment, "It's time to party." I love that sentiment. I think it's super cute. So I'm going to glue my background onto my card front, so it is just a slight bit smaller and will give me a little bit of a frame with that border of the peacock cardstock showing around the outside edge. And then I will bring in my images and start to decorate. So the first thing I'm going to do is add that banner into my treetop, and there you can see it's from the Sent with Love stamp set. And I'm going to add that right up at the top, kind of hanging down from the treetops. And I'll have the little birds holding that in place. So I'm going to put one on the left and one on the right. Then I can work down at the bottom of the scene, and I'm going to start on the far right side with my bunny. So I'll add him sitting in the grass over there, and then I want this little cake stand and the cake to sit on top of it to be right underneath that word cake. That's kind of the reason I placed the sentiment the way that I did, to kind of draw your eye toward this little tea party that our little woodland critters are having for a birthday celebration. So the mouse is going to go just to the left of that cake stand. And I guess he didn't end up covering the door, so you could have the door open. I think when I originally laid them out, he covered the door a little bit, but sometimes things get shifted over in the design, I'm sure you guys know. I added the cake knife into the bunny's hand since the slice part is over toward him, and the fork into the mouse's hand, and then I'll add the little butterfly at the end of the trail. And then all that's left is to add a little bit of glitter, so I'm going to do that on the butterfly's wings and also on the flowers that are in the bird's hair feathers. I also added it to the bow ties and the hat band and the filling and cherries on the cake, just to add a little bit of sparkle here and there when it catches the light, which I will show you right now. Super cute. I had so much fun playing with this treehouse die. There's another peek at the inside. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you did like it, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you're always alerted when I post a new video, which is every Monday and Friday. All of that interaction really helps with the YouTube algorithm, and I really appreciate it. All of the products I used are listed in the description bar below with links, and if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.